Well, let's bring in now Karen Joseph. She's Chief Executive Officer for the nonprofit organization Reconciliation Canada. Welcome to the program, Karen.
Hi, thank you very much, Gerald. It's good to be here.
Well, so I want to start with the significance of this apology, which is something your organization has worked so hard for so long to attain. What does it mean for the healing and reconciliation process?
Well, I think the apology is as the first caller mentioned, long overdue, and I think that it's critically important in the processes of reconciliation because it was one of the things that survivors asked for, that a meaningful apology be made on behalf of the church. So in that sense, it's a strong step forward.
All right, and so then what else? Because there are some, as we've reported before, that an apology is just words. More needs to be done. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I think there's a lot of different ways to look at the apology. I think one of the things that was missing from it, frankly, was the full response, the taking full accountability. I was on another program yesterday, and a caller called in, and who was a survivor, and he was there actually at the mass, and he said, "I woke up this morning and I had to pull in my hearing aids because I was beaten so badly I lost my hearing as a child. And then I had to put on my teeth because they were ripped out when I was a baby. And then I had to, and then I was remembering the sexual abuse and the physical abuse. And when we talk about that, we're talking about torturous situations. And so when the Pope apologized, he apologized on behalf of those individuals that were doing that, when in fact, and then sort of said this was what the Canadian government had wanted at the time. It's akin to saying, geez, I'm sorry I hurt you, so-and-so let me do it, or made me do it. And so I think in that sense, part of reconciliation and penance is accepting full responsibility, accountability for that. And having said that, it's a good step for us to jump forward from. I know that there are a huge number of members of the Catholic Church that really needed for this to happen, and in that sense, I'm really glad that it happened. I do wish it had gone further to acknowledge that piece. Yeah.
So just a good first step, but much more needs to be done. And also,
Yeah.
Pope Francis did describe this visit as a pilgrimage of penance, and yet absent from the itinerary, quite noticeably, is British Columbia, where the discovery of unmarked graves last summer at a former Catholic-run residential school spurred what seemed to be a year of reckoning. Why skip that site? What's your take on this decision?
I'm not sure why. I think, from my perspective, British Columbia is really, really advanced within the reconciliation movement. The first class action lawsuits that actually brought about this whole Truth and Reconciliation Commission and was paid for by the survivors, the only of its kind in the world, emerged from BC and then went to the other coast. So actually the two places that sort of pushed this forward were the places that the Pope chose not to go. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that in trying to protect the Pope and in trying to steer the conversation, the whoever is advising him actually undermined what could have potentially happened here.
I suppose we're talking, when we look at this issue, we really have to bring the scale of things, right? We're talking about more than 150,000 children forcibly taken from their parents over decades, more than a century. Your father himself experienced this in what's now been described as a cultural genocide. So how can reparations fully right this wrong?
Yeah, it's I should say it's called cultural genocide because that was one of the legal requirements for us to proceed with the Truth and Reconciliation. It was a requirement of the Canadian government in order to participate in this. So it's actually genocide. when you look at what's happening here, and it's genocide of children, not just cultures, but we're talking about children at those times. And so I think that, we have a long way to go. There are going to be thousands of more uh, remains of those children that are going to be unearthed across this country. We've got a lot of mourning to do, and I think that, as I said, this is a good first step, and it's a baby step. And I think that as we move forward, my hope is that the Catholic Church and their leadership will begin to recognize how that is perceived, how the way they're addressing the situation is perceived, and how it is felt. If you continue to rely on what are the legal norms of having met your obligations as opposed to the moral requirements of Indigenous people, we're going to have difficulties because that is the system ultimately that caused all of this. So I think there's going to be some learning that happens out of this trip. I think we'll have some strong leadership amongst the Catholic membership that will help us to push this forward. And you're right, it occurred because of the unearthing of those bodies. The first request for an apology happened even before the Truth and Reconciliation Commission occurred. So
Right.
we're talking, 10 years ago.
Karen Joseph is the Chief Executive Officer of Reconciliation Canada. We thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Gerald. I really appreciate it.